These creepy crawlers have caused huge headaches for homeowners. Here are the top 10 worst bug infestations in houses. Number 10. The bedbug-ridden bedroom. This video, posted by Town & Country Pest Control, is called "The Sickest, Most Infested Bedbug Job in Syracuse, New York," and it is aptly named. When exterminators were called into this Syracuse home, they found the worst bedbug infestations they had ever seen. They were able to immediately identify an infestation, as there were bedbugs on the curtains. From there, they went to the bed, which was covered in bedbug feces and blood spots. But nothing could have prepared them for the horror they discovered when they pulled back the bed frame. The bed frame was literally caked in bedbugs. Number 9. Invasion of the honeybees. When Loretta Yates of Ontario, Canada, saw something dripping from a crack in her ceiling, she didn't think much of it. But a few days later, her husband noticed swarms of bees outside their front door. From there, new cracks started appearing in their ceiling, all dripping with a strange substance. Turns out, the substance was honey, and their home was infested with bees. 2 massive bee colonies had formed in the first-floor ceiling. They called in the beekeepers, who spent 6 hours scraping out the honeycombs. There were over 80,000 bees in their home, and 220 pounds of honeycomb was recovered. Amazingly enough, neither of them were even stung during the infestation. Number 8. Attack of the brown recluse. Brian and Susan Trost of Weldon Spring, Missouri were ecstatic when they bought their new home in 2007. Little did they know at the time, though, that their new home came with a plethora of unwelcome house guests. Days after they moved in, spiders began leaking out from the walls. The couple, horrified, immediately contacted an exterminator. But ridding this bug-infested house of its guests was not an easy task. The couple spent 4 years battling the intrusive spiders, which were brown recluses. At one time, there were more than 5,000 of these dangerous spiders living in their walls. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Daily Top 10s with notifications on so you don't miss any of our videos. Number 7. The infested apartment complex. An apartment complex in Augusta, Maine in 2016 was so badly infested with bed bugs that the city was actually forced to call an emergency ordinance. The building had shared bathrooms and a shared common area, so the bed bug infestation had spread to all corners of the complex. When city code enforcement was called in to investigate, the entire complex was crawling with these tiny bugs. They were in the walls, all over the floors, and in the bathrooms. In fact, they were in every single room in the building. The infestation was so bad that a city task force of professionals was brought in to clean up the mess. It was the worst bed bug infestation that Maine had ever seen. Number 6. The Battle of the Australian Spider Beetle. Nadine McLaughlin from Spring Hill Park in County Tyrone, Ireland, was living in her home with her 3 children when she was forced to flee her home with only the clothes on her back. One day, when she noticed that her kitchen table seemed damp, she turned it over. She found hundreds of Australian spider beetles underneath. From there, she panicked and went into her living room, where she overturned her couch and ripped off the cloth. There were thousands of beetles crawling around inside her sofa. Terrified, she took her 3 children and fled to her parents' house. Her house was fumigated 5 times, but after every fumigation, she still found more beetles. Finally, she was forced to give up and leave her home forever. The beetles had won the battle. Number 5. The Stink Bug Takeover. Urbana residents were overwhelmed when their farm was taken over by stink bugs. Stink bugs are no stranger to the area, and they are highly invasive. But the stink bug infestation on this farm is far beyond the average infestation. The stink bugs were so bad that the residents couldn't even go outside without stink bugs flying into their mouths. The farm was inundated with them. They were in the walls, in the windows, even inside their cars. During an interview on the news, you can see the homeowner swiping away at them while she stands outside her home. And stink bugs are not harmless. Not only do they have a very pungent odor, but they also bite. The homeowners were bitten several times by these awful bugs, and although the bugs will go away when the temperatures drop, the owners have been warned that the invasive bugs will return again in the spring. Number 4. Bed bug baddies. Pest controller Rory McCarty of Bug Boys is no stranger to bed bug infestations. In fact, bed bugs are probably the most notorious bugs when it comes to infestations. However, when he was called in to investigate a house in Maryland, US, he stumbled upon the worst case of bed bugs that he had ever seen. The bedroom was slathered in eggs, and the bed bugs were literally crawling around every corner of the room. They were in the curtains, in the cushions, on the chairs, in the bed frame. McCarty had worked as an exterminator for 25 years, and he had never seen an infestation this bad. And in an unbelievable turn of events, he found out that the owner was still sleeping in the bedroom. How anyone could sleep through one of the worst bed bug infestations ever is a complete mystery. Number 3. The historic cockroach swarm. One of the worst cockroach infestations in recorded history happened in Schenectady, New York in 1979. NYPD officers were called in to respond to a noise complaint. The officers, not knowing what to expect, cautiously got out of their car, and then immediately wished they hadn't. From the moment they stepped out of their vehicle, they were swarmed by cockroaches. Inside the house, a cockroach swarm was ankle deep. Outside, cockroaches were spilling out of the home, swarming over the trees outside. They said the street was barely visible in places as cockroaches scurried across it. The police called in exterminator Harry Linendahl, who said during an interview for the press that the number of cockroaches in the building is definitely in the millions. There was a 64-year-old resident living in the swarm. She was taken to the hospital to be treated for extensive cockroach bites, and some of her pets were so badly bitten that they did not survive. Any talk of the legendary Schenectady cockroach infestation of 1979 still makes exterminators shudder to this day. Number 2. The ticking time bomb. Lieutenant Colonel Chub Gerard and his family were excited to move into their new home at the U.S. Marine Corps base in Okinawa, Japan. But soon after moving in, they discovered that a lot of this new space was already taken up by ticks. Like a real-life horror movie, they discovered that the ticks were everywhere. They were in the roof, in the floorboards, in the bathrooms. The family was terrorized and terrified as they knew it was only a matter of time before the infestation became worse. They quickly called an exterminator. The ticks were identified as brown dog ticks, which are known for infestations. The entomologists began exterminating, but quickly discovered that it was the worst case of tick infestation that they had ever seen. Still, the house was fumigated, and the family was happy to return. But when they came home, they found that the place was even worse than it had been when they had left. Not only were there dead ticks everywhere, but the living room was crawling with live ticks. Not wanting to relive the nightmare, the family fled. Number 1. Cockroach Armageddon. Professional exterminators are prepared for the unexpected when it comes to bug infestations, but sometimes even the most prepared exterminators cannot prepare for the magnitude of bugs they will find. The infestation in this home is not only unparalleled, it's caught on camera, so people can see for themselves just how ugly a true cockroach infestation can be. When exterminators were called into this home, they brought their camera to film the footage. They didn't know at the time, though, that they would end up filming one of the worst cockroach infestations ever caught on film. The house is filthy, which makes the conditions ripe for cockroaches. But as the cameras begin to pan the kitchen, the extent of the infestation becomes clear. There are cockroaches in the sink, in the dirty dishes piled high on the counter, in the corners and crevices of the door frames, creeping out of the cracks in the walls. The exterminators know at this point that this is a pretty epic infestation. But it gets worse, because once they start to exterminate, the full extent of the infestation rears its ugly head. The roaches swarm out of the walls, and hundreds of dead cockroaches litter the floors and countertops. There were thousands of cockroaches living in that infested house, and the footage of this infestation is so unnerving that it has earned itself an uncontested top spot on the list of 10 worst bug infestations in houses.